Hello, let's wrap up my reading for October. Okay, so for October, I managed to read 10 books, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think I've done pretty well. Did I get to all the books I wanted to? No, that is impossible to do because I just want to read all of them immediately. The first one I read was The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichuk, I want to say. And this was like a leftover run-on from September and I loved this. I gave it 4 stars. This is a retelling of Loki and the witch who fell in love with him, so we kind of follow her. Loki kind of pops in and out of the picture and we go to the events of Ragnarok. And I just thought this was really beautiful and easy to read, and it was really great to see these characters with just so much heart. And I didn't actually know too much about all these characters, so it was really great to read this and find out. After that, I read The Queen's Gambit on audiobook. So this is actually, I think, the first full audiobook I've listened to completely. So I'm really glad about that. I have watched the Netflix show before reading it. I think the Netflix show is better. So still read it if you want to, but especially all the chess maneuvers are so much easier when there's a visual. So there would be times where they'd be like, the bishop and and I'm like, I can't picture that, but I trust that she knows what she's doing. The trajectory and the vibe of the book was a bit different. One thing that really bothered me was that in the first couple of chapters that our orphaned protagonist is sexually assaulted and molested as a child, and it's never mentioned again, and it's someone that's just her friend. And it's just kind of like, oh. And I don't want to say it, but I feel like it's one of those cases where a man wrote it and didn't think about it, and maybe he just thought that was just part of growing up. You know, we're just experimenting, we're just playing, we're just learning sexuality through assault. And especially because she does kind of have relationships later on, I was kind of hoping that would come into play, but it just kind of brushed off like it's nothing. Overall, I gave it 3 stars. I liked it, wasn't life-changing, but you know, it was enjoyable. After that, I was reading books for the Thrillathon. I didn't vlog it. I was co-hosting it, but I didn't vlog it. I don't know, it just didn't feel right, and I didn't end up reading that much anyway, so I think that's probably for the best. But I did manage to finish 2 books in Thrillathon, so I was working on a 3rd, but it was just, I picked really chunky books. So on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I should have just picked some fast thrillers, but at the same time, I'm really glad I didn't, because I read things that I probably wouldn't have picked up for ages to come. So I started with Misery by Stephen King. I absolutely love this vintagey cover, and I really enjoyed this. I think I initially gave it a 5 stars and then bumped it down to a 4, but I really enjoyed this. It was really great being in our character's head, and the horror aspects really got me. I was like, oh my god! To the point where I think I was a bit anxious reading this. This is my favourite Stephen King so far. I've only read, I think, about 3 now, but this is a good place to start, I'd say, and it's not too long. And it's pretty straightforward. Our main character is a famous author. He gets in a car accident and he gets rescued by one of his biggest fans. But she kind of has a plan to keep him there and to write a book especially for her. And things get very fucked, but it was a great ride. Also, the movie is not as good as the book, so if you're judging it off that, don't. I read an ebook. I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, which I've never read anything from him before. I've also got The Silent Patient. Didn't end up getting to that one. And I've heard mixed things about both ones, so I just decided to read this one first and see what happened. And so I'm a bit annoyed at this book because it was sold as dark academia, and it's not really. A lot of the themes and things you think are going on are just a misdirect. So I guess it did a really good job of misdirecting, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. There were some beautiful passages and writing, but as it kind of went on, I didn't like it as much, so I was still kind of like, whoa, what the hell, the twist, which is kind of the main thing you want from a thriller. So it succeeded in that, and kind of analysing it, I can see what it was trying to do and I can appreciate it for that, but it's just not my favourite cup of tea. After that, I read The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. This one I didn't finish during the readathon, unfortunately, but it's because it's a bit long and it's a bit dense. So this is my first true crime novel, and it's about Ted Bundy. You can see him on the cover. And what really interested me was that Anne Rule, who wrote this, was friends with Ted at the time. I have mixed feelings about this. Like, obviously it was kind of interesting to get the rundown of like what went down with Ted and all his victims, but I have qualms with her interpretation of Ted. But I am also understanding like it's such a unique, complicated situation. But even when he was in prison, she was still talking to him and like maintaining friends with him, and still like, oh, Ted couldn't do that. So there was a lot of like cognitive dissonance going on, as well as with his longtime girlfriend at the time, where there was like evidence that he was the culprit, but they were still on his side. And I'm like, look, I know manipulation is real, but if it's beyond them just hurting you, like, just please turn them in so other people can be safe. Ugh. And even, yeah, it just baffles me that even when faced with like his bad actions, whether it be the murder or the cheating or the lying, people were just like, oh, but it's Ted. And like, just that he escaped jail and like court multiple times and stayed on the run for a long time. I think it was like 6 weeks and nobody found him. So it just really shows like how bad the police were at communicating with each other, because he would just go to a different state and people wouldn't know who he was. Oh. So it was painful, it was interesting. I have issues with like the bias, but I guess that's part of what makes it interesting. And I don't think I'm going to read this again. It's not the kind of book where you're like, oh yeah, that was fun. I'm glad I read it. So I gave it 3 stars. Right after that, I finished another audiobook I was already in the middle of, which was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So this was my second book by him. I had read Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires in September, and I liked it. It was kind of weird. And I'd say pretty much the same for Best Friend's Exorcism, where it kind of really plays on the is it supernatural or is it not, which is interesting. I think what made this one the strongest was the relationships and the characters, and I just really enjoyed it. Even before anything spooky was happening, the kind of build up of this friendship of them like growing up and kids and doing stupid shit together and having their inside jokes, like all that, and that it kind of came full circle at the end, and it just was really beautiful about like friendship and how friendship grows and changes and evolves as you grow older, and that's fine. Because I did listen on audiobook, I think there were like certain like just flows that I got confused on, but I think that was just my brain. I don't know if that was the writing, but overall I gave it 3 stars. Like, I liked it, but it didn't have anything like crazy good about it for me to be like 5 stars. I read The Secret History. So I kind of picked this up at the beginning of the month, put it down for Thrillathon, and picked it back up because it looks short-ish, right? It looks like 300 pages. It's not. It's Bible pages. So it's actually like 600. Yeah, it's like 600 pages. I really liked this at the beginning. This is like the mother of all dark academia. I'm gonna do a big overall dark academia thoughts and recommendations once I've read many, but I'll say a bit now. The writing was really beautiful. The characters are very interesting and fucked, and there was just a lot of like social commentary about like privilege, and that was both kind of amusing but really frustrating. As it went on, like the pacing kind of slowed down a lot, and there was like some incest and abuse I was not expecting in this. I was like, what? And a lot of like putting characters on pedestals and like, I love them, and I'm like, do you though? Do you? Especially like, I thought the teacher was going to be a bigger part of this book, and they kind of go like, yeah, that he was like her father, and I'm like, was he? He was barely in this book. He didn't really have much impact, so I was just a bit frustrated about how things came together, or didn't come together really in the end. So I think it's really interesting. I don't think I'm going to read it again. I'm glad I read it, but I just kind of hoped it would be a bit different than what it was. 3 stars. After that, I finished another audiobook that I had started ages ago. Then I cancelled my Audible, and then I got it again, and so I was like, well, I better finish it. And it was The Stand-In by Choo. Yes, and it was read by Philippa Sue, which was the main reason I wanted to listen to it, because I was like, oh my god, it's Eliza! Yeah. This was just like a light, fluffy rom-com where this girl is like a doppelganger for a celebrity. So she gets paid to pretend to be her for a bit. So the actress that she is pretending to be can have a bit of a break. Take a break! There's romance with like the actress's like best friend, who's also an actor. I wouldn't like put it like right at the top of like the rom-coms that I've read, but still decent. 3 stars. I read The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz. I did annotate this. I wasn't planning on it, but then literally like the first chapter just had some real good quotes in it, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be good. And it was. This was 5 stars. I think this is the only 5-star book I read this month, so that's really exciting. As I was reading it, I was thinking it was going to be 4, but then my heart was just so full at the end that I was like, you know what, 5. I'd say this is kind of like a literary historical mystery, and it kind of centers around books. Just so much happens. Like the twists really got me. The kind of cool romance I wasn't really vibing. Like it was one of those situations where it's like, yes, we're in love now. And I'm like, since when? Tell me exactly when, because I missed it. It was just like, I haven't seen her for a while. She's hot now. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. This was on my radar, but it wasn't until it was a book club pick for The Citadel that I was like, oh, let's go. And I'm glad I did go, because it was a fun ride. It was a crazy ride, but it was a fun ride. And the last book I read was Point of Retreat by Colleen Hoover. So this is the sequel to Slammed, and it follows our same characters. And it wasn't as good as Slammed. Like, she could have finished it there, but there was enough kind of heartfelt and really funny moments that this was still a worthwhile read for me. So I gave it 4 stars. Didn't give it 5 because of the reasons I just said. But the conflict in this was just really frustrating. But that's kind of the whole point of a story, that there's conflict. As per usual, there's a bit of toxic weirdness because it's Colleen Hoover. And there were just some things that Will did in this that I was like, really not going to address that again? Like where they'd be having a fight and he like ripped her shirt off, and then someone walked in and then he yelled at her for not having a shirt on. And I'm just like, no, I don't know enough about car terminology, but he went in and like pulled something in her car so that she couldn't drive off and had to get a lift with him. And I'm like, it's just too far, man. I know you love her, but like, respect. Respect. I will never hear the word butterfly the same ever again, and my stupid brain only just realised the significance that that's on the cover. Oh, it's great. I will still read the 3rd one. I'm kind of concerned. There's only so many times you can make them up and then break them up and then make them up before it's just like, just leave it. Just let them be happy and just leave it. Time for some statistics. I'm not going to do the full Bookly report infographic because it's just a bit too much information and it does not give you the stats correctly. Okay, the most pages I read in a day in October was 307 on the 20th. Oh my god. And so the most time I read was on that same day as well, which was 6 hours and 32 minutes. What? So overall, not like the best reading month, but I definitely did kind of step out of my comfort zone. And I think my favourite ones I read were Shadow of the Wind and The Witch's Heart. These are really good. I really enjoyed them. And I'd say Secret History. Secret History or Stranger Beside Me were a tad disappointing. And actually, Secret History was more disappointing because I kind of expected Stranger Beside Me to be a bit informational. That is everything I read in October. I'm fairly happy that I managed to read 10 books, But moving forward, like next year, I think I'm just gonna have to like pull it back just a little bit, because literally I'm not really doing anything else with my free time other than reading, because I read fucking slow. Okay, so I haven't been watching any TV, I haven't really been playing any games. I'm just reading, and I want to read faster and I can't. But I just want to actually enjoy what I'm reading and not be like stressed about it. Let me know if you've read any of the books I mentioned and what your favourite read of October was. And I will see you next time. Bye.